Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It's myself, George, joined once more by Tayte and Ayman for a spoiler discussion on the latest MCU series. This is, of course, Miss Marvel, not Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, which is now out fully on Disney Plus for everybody to watch at home on their streaming service. And yes, we're recording this. We're live, in fact. We're doing this in the middle of a heat wave, so no apologies if you can hear any fans. We are trying to make sure we get out of this. Hence the Hawaiian shirt from everyone wearing insane clothing at the moment. But before we get into the series, let alone the heat, how are we all doing tonight?
Baking. I really do want to talk about
melting,
but yeah, absolutely melting and baking.
Yeah, it's going to be one of them. I don't know. I mean, we've recorded in summers before, but nothing is like the last few days. And we were going to pre-record this, and the reality is that we could just do it live to save editing and my computer blowing up at some point with the heat this week. So please do comment your thoughts on Miss Marvel if you're watching it live. If you're watching it later on, this is a spoiler discussion. You can comment whatever you want about the series. If you enjoyed it, if you didn't enjoy it, anything in between, please let us know your thoughts of that. They are very much appreciated, and we want to get a discussion going on this series because there's a fair amount to say that's also not about the series, which we have to cover, unfortunately. And if you are new to the channel, if you don't know what we do, where we are, Tayte, where can everybody find us?
You can find us all over the place, all over the socials. So find us on Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy. Go onto Facebook and letterboxd.com, type in Cinema Savvy, and go onto Redbubble, where you can pick up a t-shirt. You can even pick up a cushion or something like that, which I'm now proudly owning and sticking in the background.
Is it helping you in the heat?
Do you know what? No. Maybe that'll be a thing for the winter where we'll get an influx of people buying them. But I will say it is very comfy. So there's one thing. If you want comfort, then grab yourself a pillow.
So as I said, everyone can check us out on those. We've had another review go up today, Light and Magic Communities, the first documentary. So it's been very, very busy recently. And before we get into sort of how busy some of it has been, I actually want to head over to everybody's thoughts before this came out. So maybe even across the series coming out, because I watched this differently to both of you. Tayte, what were your thoughts heading into this? Maybe when the show was announced versus when it began, trailers, whatnot.
So when it was announced, I had absolutely no idea what it was. I assumed it was something to do with Captain Marvel because we kind of already had that with the film and we already had kind of that character introduced. I don't know Marvel comics enough to know that there was an actual Miss Marvel. But after doing a little bit of digging, I found out that it's a very popular character, one of the most popular characters in recent years, that was going to be kind of brought to life through a series, which is really, really cool that they're able to kind of pick and choose which ones they go for. And I'm glad that they picked this one in the end, on reflection of the series as a whole. Going into it, though, first trailer, did not know what to expect. I thought it was going to be quite a quirky coming of age, really focused on those in particular things, because it's such a young character still going through that kind of high school stuff and everything like that. And that's kind of what we got in the end. Wasn't as much focused on the coming of age element. It was more focused on kind of coming of age or coming to terms with your powers, which was really interesting, and learning about your history and learning about your past. So it wasn't what I was expecting in the end, but I still quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, going into it, I saw the trailers, and I was interested. I knew of Miss Marvel as a character, but I'd never really looked into her as a character as much as other people might have. I knew what her powers were, and I knew that, I mean, she was a Muslim, so I think that was a big part of her character, and I was interested in how they were going to portray that. With me being Muslim as well, it was like one of those, it's like, would they adapt bits, or how they'd because from what I understood, like, her religious aspect and that sort of like the human side of her is a big sort of part of her character. So I was interested in how they were going to do that. But yeah, going into it, I thought, like, when I first saw the trailer, I was like, yeah, this might be interesting. But yeah, going into it, I was like really interested in sort of the more human side of her rather than her powers.
Yeah, it's quite interesting in that regards. I mean, I took a different stance. So I don't. There were two trailers, right? I think one of them was more of the typical teaser, The second one was more of like the animation type stuff we'd see with like all the drawings, and I call it like a Scott Pilgrim type thing.
Yeah.
And I saw the second one. I thought, okay, this looks different, and I'm kind of in because it's different. And obviously, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I didn't watch this every week. I was so done with Marvel, and I'm in. I mean, Tate, we did the Thor review. I'm pretty zoned out completely from the MCU at this point in time. And I just thought after Moon Knight, because I enjoyed lots of Moon Knight, but I was really not the weekly thing. Just I wasn't bothered watching it weekly. I wasn't invested weekly. I thought, you know what, for the next Marvel show, I'm just going to wait for it to finish. It will be the first Marvel thing I've ever not watched up front in like since the MCU began. Before anyone else wants to cry, because I've seen a lot of people kicking off at people doing things like that. And I'll wait till the show's done, binge it, and hopefully it works better for me than Moon Knight, which I would say it did. And obviously, you know, thoughts going in when the first trailer came out and it said, was it 5th of June? And I was like, why is it airing the same day as Obi-Wan Kenobi? Why is Disney airing, you know, not just a new series, a new character, Marvel series, probably the one character which they need to sell the most to try and get people on board with, being that it's more of a teen series. It's got the representation angle as well. It's a new character. Why was that dropped on the same window as Obi-Wan Kenobi? And that question still boggles my mind, because it's not like it's finished and She-Hulk's out like this Wednesday, is it? No. She-Hulk's out in August. So there's a lot of questions in that regard. And I'm just going to be blunt and say, I think not that Disney haven't killed the series. I think the series, as my initial thoughts, is really good. But Disney basically like curb stomped it to begin with. That from the get-go, it was up against the wall because they put it with the biggest show of the year, you know, on a Wednesday morning, 8 in the morning. I'm just going to be really polite. What percentage of people are going to press, not going to watch Obi-Wan Kenobi episode 4, I'm going to watch Miss Marvel episode 1? And the answer is not many, because we have the viewing figures for week 1. American viewing figures. I'm going to correct myself. So, thoughts heading into it. Again, I was okay heading into it, but I was just a bit annoyed at Disney, a bit annoyed with Marvel. And it's been nice seeing how everybody's been speaking about it week to week, because I don't mean this as a criticism. No one's been talking about spoilers week to week, which sort of indicated that maybe not as many people are watching it. We'll get to the finale. But also, you know, it's not had stuff to spoil. It's its own thing. It's its own set in its own way, telling its own story. So it was really interesting seeing a lot of like positive reception throughout. I'm just going to quickly plug as well Neil, who's been on our channel a lot. Neil has covered episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the Empire podcast on all their spoiler discussions. So if you want to hear what Neil's thoughts are as well, he's been on the Empire podcast recently. I just want to plug that for him as well, because I've not got him on this video today. And aside from all of them, that kind of like leads me into the next thing. Like, I don't want to beat around the bush. Like, there was a lot of like open racism from a lot of people before the series came out, and obviously, you know, we've said that multiple times on this channel. That is not anything we condone. We don't do it. We have a very tough stance on stuff like that. And I'm just going to reiterate a thing which we have to reiterate now, which isn't really a thing. It's fine to dislike a series, but what it's not fine to do is to racially abuse anybody involved in a series. A, before it's come out, and B, when it's nothing to do with the story, character, or plot. It's not acceptable whenever it is. I'm going to be honest. You can't hide behind saying I dislike it because of X, Y, and Z when we know what that reason is. So that's like my polite opening stance on that, because I don't want to get into that and then kicking off. But I want to kind of like jump to both of you. Like, I know I've kind of gone off on a tangent for a few minutes.
Yeah.
How have you both felt like, again, before it came out? Did the Kenobi stuff affect it for you? Like, how do you feel about how the show has gone on over the 6 weeks?
It wasn't just Kenobi, though, was it? Because Netflix also had quite a busy schedule slated out. They had Stranger Things, which were one of the biggest shows of the years as well, coming out at the same time. So really, you're not only The Boys as well for Amazon. It's like everyone released their biggest shows of the years at the same time. And I'm not saying that Miss Marvel isn't one of the biggest shows of the years for kind of Marvel's stint on Disney Plus and what they're putting out as far as content is concerned. What I'm saying is it was trying to compete with the biggest things out there, which are already coming from established content. And this is brand new content. That's very difficult to do, especially when you do have this open spot now where they could have released maybe the latter episodes around about now, and it would have been in a completely free spot, and a lot of people would have flocked to have seen it. It's very odd that they would choose to do that kind of level of self-sabotage against itself and make it. I don't know if they wanted it to be low key. I don't know if they wanted it to just kind of soak it up week to week and more people join on afterwards. If they knew that maybe it wouldn't have too many fans from the start, so they didn't have to do kind of an open spot for it. It's just very, very odd how they handled that. And as far as the kind of the criticism and the racism has come into this, we're at the stage now where across a lot of film and media, a lot of different opinions are being thrown out there, and fans who, I don't want to say get overexcited, because it's not just that. It's something deep rooted inside of people that they tend to just push ideas onto their own content about how they feel about certain people, how they feel about certain characters, how they feel about certain races. And it's completely unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable in every single kind of strain of medium. And I think nowadays, with fans who are so vocal in various different ways, whether they're vocal online, vocal in person, we have so many different ways that we can talk about and review and discuss films. We don't need any of that stuff being brought into it. And it seems like nowadays we're getting it in pretty much every single area of film and media, which is absolutely disgusting. It needs to be stamped out. It absolutely needs to be stamped out. And I mean, it's just something that we're coming to terms with and having to deal with, but we shouldn't have to deal with it on any shape or form. Neither should the actors. No one involved in this should receive any form of racial abuse at all because of the project that they worked on. Sure, if you don't enjoy the show, criticize the show, but don't go in and just be outright kind of abusive and racist to people. It's very, very simple, but with this kind of online age and with kind of the way that film and media is being talked about, like nowadays, it's just, you know, people are just going for it, and yeah, it's frustrating from all angles.
Yeah, I think with the spot they gave it, with it coming out with Obi-Wan, I don't think they set up. I think I mean, Disney is a huge company, so they would have put some thought about putting it where it was. Maybe not as much as they would have thought about maybe like what Moon Knight or Loki, one of their ones that they really had faith in. It could be that they just didn't have as much faith in Miss Marvel as much as they had with Moon Knight or Loki or Hawkeye or whatever. But yeah, I mean, with the racial abuse, I mean, because I, as I said in the boys review, I watch everything with my family over the weekend, so it didn't really affect me the spot that it was in, because I mean, over the weekend I'd watch Obi-Wan, then Miss Marvel, then Stranger Things, and the boys, as a sort of like over the weekend. So the spot didn't really affect me as much. I did see on the release day, like it was getting review bombed and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, yeah, I get. I mean, I saw some of the criticism was like, yeah, it was mixed because they didn't like the show. That's fair. But if you're just review bombing it because of the characters and the sort of, I mean, the actresses and the actors and the sort of like stuff about the character that you don't like, what's the point? That's just there is no need for it. It's just one of those. But I mean, it is absolutely disgusting. But I mean, again, being how I am with my skin tone, you sort of become numb to it at a point. And I think with that, when I saw it being review bombed, I was like, oh yeah, okay, it's one of those ones. Yeah, I'm just not gonna look into it, because I already know why it's being review bombed. There's no point in like me looking into it, getting angry, because then me getting angry doesn't affect me. I'm still gonna watch it anyway, regardless of what people say.
It's really well said of that, and I want to actually say something very on the cuff. If anyone's familiar with January the 6th in America, the trial is currently happening. And this isn't to Miss Marvel, but I'm bringing this up because it's about time. If anyone's heard of the Fandom Menace, who are a bunch of extreme right-wing absolute morons on YouTube that just spout nothing but racist abuse, woke, you know, those sort of tools. There's accounts called like Mauler that's a part of them. There's that weird geese, as they all look like Beavis and Buttheads, all that sort of stuff. Their videos were brought up for the world to watch for the January the 6th court case happening right now in America, because they are looking at extremism that is influenced by people online. So I will reiterate what we've said over a lot of times over the last few months. If you have any followers, it doesn't matter if it's 1, 12, 20, 200, 2,000, 200,000, 2 million. You have a platform and you are influencing people. When these clowns are telling people, yeah, go to the Capitol, and now they're all crying that they've been caught and they're being investigated. I'm sorry, but you've engaged in a coup. So, when people jump on saying, oh, I'm boycotting this because of this. Oh, who told you to boycott it? This right-wing fanatic. Brilliant. You're a moron. Move on. So, yeah, and if they do follow us, they're upset, just fuck off. Because I'm bored of saying it for every series. And obviously, I think that the worst take I saw recently was someone saying that, I boycotted Kenobi because they called out racist fans. Brilliant. I don't want you to go near Kenobi. Well, actually, it's because you're too skint to have a Disney Plus account. But let's move on. But let's talk into this series now. So let's actually talk about the series. Sorry, I wanted to get Prince out of the way. Let's talk Kamala Khan, because we all kind of mentioned we didn't know too much about her, and I think she's one of the more modern heroes. And when I say modern hero, they're not really heroes. I think of like Bane, Deathstroke, these characters sort of conceived in not the golden age of comics, but like that 90s onwards, who I deem all of them as modern. And I knew nothing. I knew she was in that Avengers game from a year or two ago that came out on PlayStation that was meant to be terrible, but I knew like Miss Marvel was the main character. I knew that she had like fantastic, like the stretchy things. And again, a big criticism of the show was that she's not got the stretchy skin. It's like almost powers, which I think is a really cool change because they're about to make a Fantastic Four film. So it would be very weird to have two elastic heroes on screen at the same time, for general audiences. And kind of going in with that, I just kind of want to actually just jump straight into Iman Vellani, who played her. Now, I told you I didn't watch this in the build-up, but I've seen her interviews, and she's incredible. She is a fucking Marvel nerd, and it's fantastic because she loves the franchise. She literally has done press in character. It's almost like she wasn't even like acting for some of the hype scenes, and it's just been amazing seeing her interviews. And I'm pretty sure like she's an unknown, that when she was cast in this, it was one of those like open casting things. She might have been in like a few short films, but to my knowledge, there's like no background. It's literally like a beginning role, and to get the lead in a Marvel series, I think it's remarkable. And I just want to say her performance across these episodes was probably my favorite thing, and that kind of jumps into the tone of the series for me too. That because it's not made for adults, like if you're a teenager, you'd probably like this maybe a bit more than me. I really enjoyed this, but this isn't made for adults. It's not made as a like Moon Knight was, that darker drama talking about his issues and his disorder. Sorry, not dyslexia. And with this, it was like, as you said, it's where's my place in this? Where's my sort of my story within my family, within society? And that's what I kind of love. That yes, it's got very low stakes, but there's nothing wrong with that. The series was her story, and I think where it left us was a really like fun position moving forwards.
Yeah, the entire series plays out as kind of an internal discovery of powers, of where they fit in their own society, where they fit within just their school life, and it's everything. Like it's absolutely everything, and it's all stemming from Iman Vellani, who is Kamala Khan, and you watch the interviews, and she's just bubbly and just vibey and just all over it, and just has incredible knowledge of Marvel to start off with. She's not just a nerd; she's like a super fan. She knows everything off the cuff. She was schooling Feige on a couple of things as well. And apparently, she's sending him messages.
A lot of aggro.
Yeah, a lot of aggro.
616.
Yeah,
yeah.
But
she spoiled. Did she spoil something in filming? Sorry, like there's Didn't Tom Holland send her a photo of like him with the two Spider-Men, and she got fuming that he spoiled it, but she couldn't do it to anyone else?
Yeah,
like there's mad stories with. Sorry, I jump in. I just want to say, because like every interview's been golden with her, and that's what kind of makes the series funner for me. Is that she's enjoying it outside of the screen.
Yeah, and it's not only that, but like it's just comments and interviews like, oh, if you were to meet anyone from Marvel, who would you want to meet? And she was immediately straight away Robert Downey Jr. And then she was like, I will actually melt if I meet Robert Downey Jr. It's that kind of energy that she brought to the role itself. I don't think she's acting. I think that is just her. I think they just genuinely just gave her the script, stuck her in front of the screen. she wasn't acting those parts. She was literally pretending to be just Kamala Khan, and that was what she felt was her life. And that's fantastic. When you find an actress or an actor who can do that, it's phenomenal. And the fact that it is her first role in anything, like there is nothing before this, is even better, because it means that like she can develop with this character and base kind of her career off this starting role and then see where it goes from there. But she was fantastic, absolutely across the entire series, just buzzing with enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. Like the way that she came across in interviews. I mean, I didn't like religiously watch her interviews, but I did see clips, going around. Like, yeah, when she goes at Feige for, with Feige saying that the MCU is Universe 616, and she like disputes that, and like she DMs Kevin Feige and goes at him and says like, no, it's not this, it's the fan made one, which is a whole load of numbers I can't remember. But it's one of those. It's like she is basically a Marvel nerd. I mean, I think I think it was Kevin Feige. Also, there was a interview with Kevin Feige, and like he had to have a go at her because she was watching Disney Plus in between filming, and it was on her phone. So Kevin Feige was like, "You shouldn't watch it on your phone. Just watch it when you have time, not on your phone when you got no time." Stuff like that. She's so entrenched in the Marvel fandom that she could have just been any Marvel fan, and the fact that she got this role, I think, is a big thing for her, especially as you said, because she's got no roles before. This character is quite young. I mean, I think the character itself was introduced in like 2010, but
Oh wow.
the character as a character is quite young, so she has that time to like age and grow with the character, which should be really good. It's similar to like how Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. like grew into their roles. She can grow into that and not become typecast, because that's not what you want to be, but like be synonymous with that character, which is not a bad thing, especially for the MCU.
Yeah, it's really well said actually. And the Kevin Feige was great. I think she did an AMA on Reddit last week, and it was popping up all over Twitter. And they asked her what's your favorite MCU show, and she put like the first half of WandaVision. Not that that's a dig, but it's like she's not scared to say anything, like because she's a fan, as we've all said. And I just think it's so refreshing. And this is, I guess, like not Marvel. This is even stuff like Star Wars and so many big franchises. Just to have somebody that represents the franchise, that they're enjoying it. Like I don't want to get into a Bond thing with Daniel Craig on because he's always loved it, but you get actors who are very like clear and very sturdy. This is my press face. These are my press interviews. With her, this is me as a person doing these interviews as me as a person, and it kind of really adds to the role with her. And I think even when she's got some of the more emotional moments, like she's such a, I mean, I say such a young actress, she's very, very young. I want to make a quick comment to Jez, who's been on our channel before. She's actually 2 months older than Jed, so I feel even older now. And he's off to San Diego this week, so if he's watching, I hope he has a fantastic time because he's going to Comic-Con, which isn't making anyone envious at all. But that being said, I mean, one of the reasons I think Kamala works so well as a character is also the family. And the Khan family in this, I've got to say, like they're billing She-Hulk as like an office comedy. This is one of the funniest Marvel series I've seen, and it's because we get to spend so much time with they're not a dysfunctional family, because people throw that word around a lot. They're a very like, I don't want to say normal household, but
Traditional.
they're not engineered for like a traditional, maybe like a stereotype of like immigrated families from from the East and stuff like that. It's really interesting, but every time they're on scene, it's just always entertaining as a viewer. And when there's dramatic moments between them, you can understand that drama and you sort of believe and build into it. But when they're sort of funny, and I think this is with the show, like, again, I've watched 6 episodes across like 3 days. So, I did it a lot easier than most spreading it weekly, but it was just, some of the best of was just spending time with them, whether that's the mother, whether it's the father. They all had great chemistry. And I think when you have that in films, when you've got this chemistry as a family, it just builds to the occasion. And actually, I want to, and as I said, I enjoyed all of these characters, but I want to single out the mother. I want to pronounce the name right. Zenobia Shroff, who plays Maneva. I thought she's phenomenal. in this. I think she's easily my favorite character so far of the series, and I think she's got a really compelling character arc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to add to that previously, Miss Marvel isn't even 10 years old yet. Miss Marvel was created in 2013, first appearance.
Is that newer than Miles Morales then?
It must be.
Yeah, I
swear
think
it is. So to have that kind of character, first of all, become so popular so quickly, whilst I was reading through that, it said that it ranked, so Miss Marvel was ranked at number 11 on the all-time Avengers list, which is the highest ranking female, which is unreal for a character that's only been around for less than 10 years to be that highly ranked and that kind of loved already as a character. But like you said, the family, oh my God, it's so refreshing and nice to see a family dynamic in a TV show that actually feels like a family. Like, I've seen it so often where families are either too clean and too close together or too dysfunctional that it doesn't quite work and you can't actually understand, you can't even see how they could be related. This, you absolutely see how they're related, and you can see why and how they get on and why and how they don't get on in other ways. It's brilliant. It's really well worked. And the acting across the board from the entire family, like I'd say, Zenobia Troff is the standout from that. But across the entire board, it is fantastic. I also want to give a shout out to Sagar Shaikh. Is that how you pronounce it? Shaikh, who plays Amir, who was also really, really funny. I don't want to say the comic relief because he only had a few kind of pinpoint moments where he was kind of throwing that kind of humor element in, but I enjoyed his scenes whenever he was on. He seemed to always have a one-liner or something to input into the situation. So, yeah, just a really nice family dynamic across the entire show.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the mother had a good character arc. Like she really did. I love the dad even more, just because he was such
Big
a
Hulk.
yeah. I mean, like when he was the Hulk and like when she got embarrassed, you could see that he was like actually upset, but he was the comic relief and like all the stereotypes, like him talking on speakerphones that other people could hear. I mean, coming from a Brown family, that is actually true. Like the dad will go on speakerphone sometimes just to make it easier. But all the sort of like they didn't play on it too much, so it was like an offensive stereotype, but they did play it very close to culturally how it is, especially with how protective the family were of Kamala being the youngest and being the only girl, stuff like that. Culturally, that is a big thing that like the youngest are always a lot more sheltered than the older ones. So the older ones, like I mean, I have a little sister. I used to get a lot more freedom than she did at her age. So it's one of those. It's like a cultural thing where they got it pinpoint, but they didn't overstep the mark on the sort of like stereotyping to make it offensive. But they did play it very close to how it would be in a traditional family. So yeah, I think that was really good. And yeah, the mother's character arc was in like, I mean, all the stuff that she had to do with it was really interesting, and like how she developed as a character, how she grew a lot closer to Kamala over the series was really well done.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to quickly, not to take a point, because there's some really good stuff there. I just want to quickly give a shout out to the dad, Mohan Kapoor, that plays him. Ready for this? He, in the Indian versions of the Marvel films, he voices Doctor Strange in all of them. And
Wow.
Even better, he dubs The Rock in all of The Rock's films. So I want to get that out there, which is just makes that scene as him as the Hulk even more incredible, now I'm being honest. Just kind of going back to the family story, I don't want to sort of put it on the spot, because obviously I've known you sort of 15 years. And I know you sort of obviously you were born here, brought up here, so I've known you for so long. Is there not stereotypes in play, as you said, but with this series, like, does it feel closer to home than when, like, I think when I chat to you and one of our other friends, it's like Western media's not really done series or films. I mean, we'll get to the Partition later, but I kind of text you both, and I was like, I don't think I've ever seen the Partition mentioned in Western media. And I know fragments of it. And at the same time, it's kind of great that this series has shed a light on it, because it's so important to not just this character, this family on screen, but to an entire generation of immigrants, to people like living in Pakistan, living in India, like the effects the partition had, and even like we always talk about like British history, how the British Empire is not, this good thing that they always get sort of shone a light on as being. It's really interesting some of that stuff. And like, did you know much of that in advance, or were you surprised at sort of how well they handled it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from an Indian family. Like my family is Indian, so the partition isn't something that's really ingrained in our history itself, because the partition is more ingrained in like Pakistan and those types of families. But I knew of it and I knew what it was, but I didn't know. I mean, it really shone a light on some of the history that and how it became about and what impacted it and stuff like that, which was really well done as well. Like they used like proper sort of like old school clips and stuff like that, which was really well done. But yeah, it shone a light on stuff that I didn't know, which was really good because yeah, as you said, the partition isn't mentioned a lot in Western media, if at all, really.
I was going to say the only time I've seen it mentioned, unless it's a show directly about it, I know that ITV did a show. I can't remember what the name of it was, which was about the partition a few years back. But the only other show I can think of that even slightly tackled it and only really kind of went into it for one episode was Doctor Who, which did an entire episode on it called Demons of the Punjab, which was actually very well received because of everyone was saying, wow, we've never really seen any stories kind of put across in Western media about the partition. So the fact that that was kind of said back then, and now this is being said now about this series, just kind of shows that it's an area which isn't really talked about at all in Western media. So the fact that they're able to put something forward in this show, obviously it's to do with kind of the country which Kamala's family is from, and therefore it's to do with that kind of character's internal history. And the fact that not only was it not we want to show the partition, we want to show kind of something that happened to like both Pakistan and India in the past, but it was more of not only do we want to show that, but we want to make it relevant to the story. We want to try and ingrain it into that character and make sure that if we're going to show this stuff, it's not just because we're showing it because it has an integral part to the story. So it was really well done how they did that in the end.
Yeah, and I kind of want to jump in as well. Like some of the representations, like we get a lot of scenes set at the mosque. We get to meet the community. There's an episode set around Eid, which again I didn't expect to see. Not just on a big, but again, this is American budgets, and America. I mean, England's pretty terrible for racism, but America's like on another level of where this country is. And there was things that's why I like really enjoyed watching it. And I know the writer for this is they wrote one episode of Loki, and it's just completely slipped my mind, which is really frustrating. Bisha K. Ali, and she's I think she's a British Pakistani comedian. So to get this series, you get a lot of where that comedy comes in. I just really want to quickly bring up Con by Bavaria. Actually, hello, my friend. He always jumps on Marvel stuff. I watched many reviews from Americans with Muslim or South Asian heritage, and they could all identify the fun dynamic. That's great. And this is one of the really good things I've seen of this show, is that, I've seen a lot of people online, on Twitter, other outlets, they've made sure they've had like Muslim representation when they're doing reviews. I mentioned Neil on Empire. There's like every Wednesday there'd be a chain. I apologize, I forgot the account, and he'd gathered all the reviews together. And I think almost in a way the Marvel community has sort of banded around it in a really respectful manner too, which should be the way. I know Shang-Chi had very similar stuff last year. Well, of course, it dealt with a lot of the Chinese stuff as well, and obviously Black Panther a couple of years ago, and we'll have that again later on this year, Black Panther 2. But where I want to kind of jump in, because I sort of took myself off tangent there, is when we get those scenes like with the mosque, it's never not taking the piss, but again, like American budget, American TV, Western media could get it really wrong. And like when we've got these subtle scenes of just them praying, and like there's some like split comedy in there. There's like a really funny scene when they wear the two hats. He gives the haram hat I forgot the name of. It's going to annoy me. He gives the haram hat to what's his friend, the one that tells us she's in the end.
Bruno or Cameron.
Bruno, that was
and
it.
Cameron gets the halal one. And I mean, I don't know if it's meant to be funny, but I saw that as a little nod. Like if you know what they mean, it kind of made me laugh and chuckle. And I just thought there's some really like well done things in it. Again, it feels quite natural. It doesn't feel like I'm forcing this in. And I don't know, am I like overthinking some of that stuff? Because we've not, And also, sorry, like, this is what you should have in TV. TV get more time to tell these stories. You can spend more time with people, even if it's not integral to the 40 minutes you have that day. You could spend a couple of minutes with them. You can't do it in a film, which is why Miss Marvel to me had this benefit of being on TV.
No, 100%. This absolutely benefited being on TV. There was a lot that was discussed in this, and the fact that they had to go through so much of the culture, not only to just get the setting, but to be able to set the story. And it's always difficult with character origin stories to get it all done within a film, because they have to start off with absolutely nothing at the very, very start, and by the end be a fully fledged hero. That's very difficult to squeeze into that amount of time. If you've got a series to build up that character and kind of have smaller moments dotted in there to kind of push you on your journey, it's a little bit easier. And that's where I think Marvel TV works best. I think this is one of the top Marvel shows they've put out so far, genuinely. It is a fresh take on kind of what we've seen before. It's not just kind of like, oh, we're seeing these characters in this environment and stuff like that. Like, I'll always be kind of quite a heavy critic of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because it was so many missed opportunities with the characters they did there to actually develop them a lot further. In fact, this one did it absolutely right, because it really did develop the character so much more, from basically starting from zero all the way up to where it is now, and being able to, I'd say, happily integrate into a film kind of that's coming out next year. To be able to have that kind of jump is fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that last point, because I think with the way that Disney put it where it is, I think they used it more as a setup for the Marvels rather than actually having it as a setup for Kamala, even though that was done really well. I think it was more of a setup for the Marvels and how that's going to play into the MCU. But yeah, it was really interesting. Some of the sort of episodes, like it's interesting that you mentioned the Eid one, like that sort of stuff. The little moments, like the halal haram hat, like when that scene happened, it got a chuckle out of my whole family, because we understood exactly what that meant. But stuff like that they mentioned, like when Kamala's friend, I forgot her name, has a shoe stolen from the mosque. That is actually a thing that happens. I mean, I've had my shoe stolen from the mosque like once or twice, and it is a thing that happens. So it's like they did do it really well. Like, you could tell there was somebody involved that was actually Muslim and has lived that sort of Kamala Khan's life, not to the superheroes, but like the actual like family dynamic and the sort of like culture. So it was really interesting that they did that.
Yeah, Bavarius, but again, the scene, the final episode where they show their IDs before the sentence ended, was funny at first because I recognised what this really meant. And that's it. And kind of what you said earlier, actually, with really on topic with Falcon Winter Soldier. I don't want to get into them again, but Chris Evans sent a tweet out last week to correct Deadline, because they and Chris Evans just tweeted Deadline saying no, Sam Wilson is Captain America, and loads of people were kicking off at Chris Evans. There's literally a series explaining why he's Captain America, and I'd say that Sam Wilson's the best part of that series. And a lot of it got massacred with COVID because it was the whole vaccine subplot they had to delete. But yeah, again, it's like it's so current, all this ridiculous extremist like right wing thing, and they don't make these shows for that reason. And you could tear apart everything. It's just modern culture has people jumping on it, and again for this series, like I love the fact that it sort of went quiet when the series started, because it's almost like not the people who like you don't want not watching it, but they're not watching it, so they're not going to cry. Like, could you imagine if the haram thing was on a stupid right wing YouTube page? It's a funny inside joke for people that know what you said, Ayman. And it's little things like that that just give it that real life sign that comes with it. And kind of like where we go with this, I guess, if we want to talk about the villains per se, the clandestines.
Yeah.
I'm going to be quite blunt. I didn't care for them. I didn't think they were good as villains. However, and this is more of a throwback to like phase 1 and 2 Marvel, I'm so invested in the hero and the origin and their story. I'm really not fussed that the villains weren't great, but also the villains aren't really the cause of the story. They're there to serve a purpose. So that's why I'm very balanced with it, because, hypothetically, not to get into Thor spoilers, if Christian Bale had been terrible, I'd have been gutted because A, it's Christian Bale, but B, you know how important gore is to the story. He's a god butcher.
Mm.
Whereas for this, I never felt like they were that integral to Kamala's story. But again, the focus of this story is telling Kamala's, how she became Miss Marvel and the family and everything. So am I being like polite on them, or does that make any sense?
I would say I also didn't really care too much for the clandestines, I'll be honest. And even though the acting was good, especially from Nimra Butcher, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. She was fantastic as kind of the leader of that villain pack. But at the same time, I really didn't care for their story too much. It's really sad to say that, but I was so focused on the origin of Kamala Khan that, like, it felt like a distraction. I know that one of the major criticisms that people have been giving for this series is the villains weren't prominent enough. And dare I say, with this one, they were so in the middle. They were prominent. They were part of the story. They did drive it forwards. But I didn't think of them as a big enough threat, really, to kind of really impact the story. So personally, in my head, I would have rather have gone in one of two directions. They could have made the villains a lot more threatening, or not really have them as villains at all, just have them as kind of like making mistakes. Have them on the side of good, air them on the side of good, but just have them flawed. And I think because they were in the middle, because they kind of knew what they were doing was not good and only kind of benefited themselves, it didn't really make them flawed characters. It just made them villains in the eyes. So because they were so in the middle, we didn't really get much time to really focus too much on them. They weren't big, bombastic, like actually causing damage, killing people. At the same time, they weren't so small that they were only causing minor kind of inconveniences and really testing kind of Kamala to see which side she would fall upon. It was kind of a straight up just meh villain. I don't know how they could have changed it really, but those are just, a few suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, same. I didn't really care for them. I think they served their purpose, which was for Kamala to sort of understand her powers, and give her some sort of like backstory about where her powers came from until the end. But we'll get into that. But I mean, yeah, they served their purpose, and I think they were done well because they served their purpose, and then after they served their purpose, they were done with. You just didn't see them again, which is, it's not a shame because they weren't really that interesting. But I mean, in my point of view, Marvel don't do villains very well. When they're doing really well, they're doing really well, like Christian Bale. But I think from what I remember from the trailers, they weren't even mentioned. You didn't see them, so I didn't think they were going to be a big part of it anyway. Whereas, like as you mentioned in Thor Ragnarok, you see Christian Bale in the trailers as Gore, so he is a prominent part. Whereas in the trailers for Miss Marvel, it was all about her, not about the villains. So
Dare I say, sorry, just quickly cutting in, I want to say that the villains from the trailers at least is it the DODA or whatever they're called?
Yeah.
Department
of Damage Control.
Yeah. They seem like more of the villains from the trailers, at least for me.
Yeah. I think they played as a secondary villain. They were introduced in episode 1 and 2, if I remember correctly, and then you didn't see them until the last episode. So I did wonder about those. Like, are they not? Are they going to carry on with that after episode 2? Like, what's that? It felt a bit weird. But I think they played it really well with the last episode about how Kamala and the community got around her. But yeah, the clandestines, meh. They were there. They served their purpose, and that's about it, really.
Yeah, the DODC stuff. I mean, again, it's face assignment, which is fine, but the finale is probably my favorite episode, and it's like it was a really fun way for us as viewers to not see her with her powers, but to see her using her powers as a hero. And because it's such a community-driven story, for it to be at the school and to have the community with them for the finale, it's not big stakes, it's not saving the worlds, it's saving an individual in Cameron. I thought was quite a noble way for them to tell it, and again, it's enhancing the story by focusing on characters. It's giving character development. Even when Cameron's sort of turning on them, she's still trying to save him, and it's that logic of the hero. And I really liked that stuff with it, and I think it was the strongest points. And also, it was entertaining. like when you got the fight sequences, you got the baseball stuff. It was a really fun way to do it, and again, it's going back to that demographic that yes, it's a Marvel series, but ultimately, if I'm going to be blunt, I'd say the primary target audience for this series is probably 13 to 17-year-old girls, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's not dissing comic readers or anything. I'd say, like, as a TV series, that's how I view this. And obviously, every Marvel fan's going to want to watch it. That's catching up and whatnot, which is great. And I hope they had a good time watching it. And it makes this sort of stuff interesting. And I mean, the fact that Sandy turned up from Succession, who was randomly in one scene in Spider-Man No Way Home, it makes you think that, oh, is he signed on for more? Are these going to be a little bit of a threat moving forward? Don't want to speculate, don't want to theorize. Could these be Skrulls for Secret Wars or Invasion, whichever one they're going to do? You know, there's loads of little things in the pipeline. And obviously, you know, we don't know where it's heading, but we know that the Marvels next year, and as you said earlier, I mean, this is almost a setup for that film, which I definitely feel like it is. But before we get into the ending, this is what I want to talk about. Is there anything left to speak about before we get to the revelation and the credit sequence?
Yeah, I was going to say, just very quickly, my favorite episodes from this series, and I know that we kind of discussed this a little bit beforehand, were the first episode and the last episode. As much as I've given good praise for this series so far, I do feel like the middle episodes in this series did blend a little bit into the background. And I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It wasn't like every single week there was a massive event that happened that kind of changed everything. I don't want to say the story dropped off and what was on the screen wasn't interesting. I feel like the start and the end was so big for the show that it kind of eclipsed the rest of the series. And for most of it, you're just kind of sat there watching along, and the stakes never really go up and up and up and up. It's kind of stakes go up, they come slowly down, and start to build with maybe one episode to go, and then they spike up again. Maybe that's just a problem with the structure of the show. I don't know. But I can understand why audiences wouldn't be as engaged with this show in those middle few episodes, because for me, at least, it did blend into the background. Like, I did have to refresh myself going into this review of what happened in the middle episodes, in what order, and kind of go through that. Whereas I could easily tell you what happened in the first episode, what happened in the last episode very clearly, because those were the two standouts.
Yeah, I think the only things I would mention is, first and last episode were my favorites as well. I think there was other stuff, little bits that really were really interesting, like when they were showing the text messages, and like it was like on the walls and stuff like that, like the art stuff that was when she was going to Avengers Con, and you could see the text messages as she was traveling to places. That was really well done. And the fact that they introduced the clandestines as Jinn, that was a real shock, because I didn't think they would do them, because being Muslim, like the Jinn is part of our religion as well. Like there is something that is a part of our like religion. So to call them Jinn and them like being on a different plane, essentially, was really interesting, because that's how, me being a Muslim, we believe what the Jinn are. They just live on a different plane. So that was really well done, the way they like tied the Jinn mythology to the clandestines being from a different plane. But yeah, I mean, yeah, first and last episode were my favorites as well. I think the episode when they were in Pakistan, that was a really interesting one. I think they did 2 episodes. One was like the flashback, and the other one was with the red daggers. I like the introduction of the red daggers. That was interesting. But yeah, they did sort of blend in. But first and last episode were my favorites. The ones in Karachi were okay. They didn't like blow me away or anything, but they were interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought the Jinn then. So obviously, you know, I'm not familiar with that. And this is, I'm going to kind of jump to, again, the sort of the culture importance. And this actually goes to production, the behind the scenes, the showrunners. There's no way a stereotypical, like, white writer's going to know the Jinn unless they really know the religion or know how to bring them in without probably causing, like, offense, even if not intended to be. And this just goes that whole behind the scenes of these productions where you need to bring on people who have the cultural backgrounds that can make this the correct representation. And this is why it's so important for shows and series like this. And it's not just Marvel, it's not just Star Wars, it's like normal dramas, it's anything you see. It's about varying that background. And again, there'll be people that now learn of the Jinn, but like myself, I'll put my hand to say it, for a Marvel series. And that's great that I've been able to, because even though, I'm not going to think of it as a Marvel thing, it's just them giving a platform. And again, it goes down to the creative team, so I don't want to keep repeating myself. But yeah, favorite episodes to me. Again, it's hard for me because I binged it, and actually, I want to pose this to YouTube before we get to the last bit. I'll ask this to both of you. Do you think? I mean, I know you've watched it weekly. Do you think this would have been better to binge it together or watch weekly? And the reason I'm curious is because Ayman, you watched it with your family, which I think is really interesting for this series more than anything. And that's one of the reasons I wanted you on this straight away, because I knew you're watching your family every weekend. And obviously, like Tayte, as you were watching it. I mean, you're in Austria, you're in England, you're just watching it when you could. How was the viewing experience like? Do you think you should have waited till it ended to binge it, or do you think the weekly stuff was working just enough?
I'll be honest, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much if I binged it all in one go. Purely because having that time to settle between the episodes, absorb the information, I've always preferred that kind of model. I don't like the waiting for spoilers. That's definitely one thing, and that's where the binging comes in, and that's why that side of it is good. But for me personally, it's a series where you do need a little bit of time to reflect on every single episode, especially kind of, I'd say the first episode and last episode really being ones you need to reflect on, and all of the stuff that happens in Pakistan with the flashbacks, everything that's involved there. You do need time to reflect on that. Otherwise, some of it will get lost. So I personally believe it probably would have been better to watch week by week. But yeah, I feel like it could be watched either way, but that's my personal opinion on it.
Yeah, I think weekly would have been better. I mean, it's like you mentioned at the beginning, like you were getting that Marvel fatigue. I think that wouldn't have been as bad if you watched it week by week, because it sort of broke it down and yeah, as Tate said, you could have that time to absorb some of the more interesting story plots. Whereas if you binged it all in one day or 2 days, you'd sort of like you'd finish it begrudgingly, if anything, because you'd just be tired of that sort of like Marvel sort of theme that Marvel does have going on. So I think week by week would have been a lot easier. But yeah, if you wanted to binge watch and you enjoyed it that way, then that's absolutely fine as well. I just enjoy it week by week more than anything.
No, that's really good. Because I said, normally on the logic, I'm in the same boat as you. I would prefer weekly discussions, theorizing, time to settle, time to rewatch. I think it's kind of a reflection of where I am. And I think Moon Knight, I was still quite disappointed by the finale, which didn't really help. But I mean, if we're going to move on from Miss Marvel, not moving on too much, if only I was bolder like Patrick Stewart and could wave my hand and play the X-Men 97 theme. We got the big revelation that Miss Marvel is now not the first mutant, but the first mutant in the timeline that we are watching, I guess we can say. And obviously no longer an Inhuman, which is interesting. So I didn't know that she's only 8 years old as a comic book character, which Inhumans fans crying to make me laugh even more now. I mean, I'm not going to say this, I'm not bothered at all. Either spoiled for me, and I really wasn't fussed that on Wednesday, as I do, I can't get off Twitter. You both know this a lot. And I saw X-Men trending, and I was like, cool. Completely forgot that Miss Marvel had aired that morning. Because as usual, people haven't been spoiling it. They've been tweeting how much they love it. And I clicked X-Men. Boo, Miss Marvel as a mutant. Miss Marvel's a mutant X-Men theme. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And that kind of made me want to watch the show a little bit more, which is probably more rewarding for both you as viewers of watching it weekly. But the implications of this, I mean, we know the X-Men are coming. We know the mutants are coming. But I did not expect it in this show of all the shows. And actually, I'll tip my hat off to them. I'm not going to literally do it. But I think this is one of the smartest things because it doesn't detract from the series. The series isn't therefore set up for X-Men. It's a logical character choice for this version of Miss Marvel. Does that sound a bit weird? How do we feel?
Yeah, I feel it's fantastic. I really, really like the decision. Not just because the Inhumans... I mean, we had Black Bolt in Multiverse of Madness. That's kind of the only reference we've had to the Inhumans. Maybe they'll revive the Inhumans later on down the line. Who knows whether that will happen or not? I doubt it. I really doubt it. I mean, I feel like Marvel.
One of
at
the
some
Inhumans
stage...
was in the Eternals. That says how much Marvel care.
Yeah. But at the same time, like changing her from a character who's directly linked to kind of that run of characters that is not dead on arrival, but it's been tried, it hasn't worked. X-Men does work, and having her as a mutant, which isn't too much to change really, to say that she's a mutant instead of an Inhuman. It's the subtlest of character changes. I think you said beforehand, like the original writer wanted her to be a mutant in the first place, and that could never happen. So this is kind of her getting her wish when her character finally gets adapted to kind of the screens. But what it does mean is that when we do get X-Men later on down the line, we already have that internal link within the MCU, which I guess we didn't have before. The only one we had was Multiverse Madness, which is like different universe, different timeline and stuff like that. So with this, we've got someone who is in the main canon, in the main timeline, who is a direct link and could be seen as a character that, you know, can be the happy bridge between the two. And because of that, we immediately, the universe is expanding with the subtlest of changes. I love it. I really love the decision.
Yeah, same. I mean, from what I've heard in Humans, I mean, I know we had the TV show and that, I mean, that did amazing, as everyone knows. But from what I've heard, I think they were mentioned in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well. But again, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But yeah, they had Black Bolt in Multiverse of Madness, which is okay. I think making Kamala an X or a mutant is really interesting choice, because they had Patrick Stewart in Multiverse of Madness, and then you had that little tiny Easter egg in Multiverse of Madness of Reed mentioning that his kids are there, and he has kids, and they're also mutants in the comics. I mean, Franklin Richards is the most powerful mutant ever, so I think they're using mutants as a slow burn, like a slow build up, which is really what they need. I thought they would have introduced it in Eternals, but that didn't happen. But I think making Kamala a mutant more than an Inhuman, really, it does really open up the landscape. And I think they did it because they realized that nobody really cares about the Inhumans, even though they might have their interesting points as a sort of a name. They have a lot of negative connotations around them now, considering how badly the TV show does. I think it's one of those that Marvel wants to just wipe from your mind. Like, it happened, we don't need to talk about it anymore. She's a mutant. We're gonna go with this, and then take it from there, essentially.
Yeah, it's surprising. Inhumans was going to be a film. I remember that on the Phase 3 slate. Then that became a TV series. Then that became... I can't even remember. It wasn't even like...
TV series.
It wasn't even... Didn't it get cancelled halfway through the season? Like, it was... It was almost as if they gave a green light to something way too far in advance, which is going to be probably a conversation at San Diego this weekend. We've got Bavaria saying, pro tip, don't try to explain to hardcore fans that the scientific point of view Inhumans are also based in mutants. I get that, that's fine. But as you said, Ayman, I think a better word, negative connotations. The general audience aren't going to know what an Inhuman is, where it's a lot easier to say mutant.
Yeah.
And Marvel also probably don't want them to go around thinking, do I now need to watch Inhumans to watch Captain Marvel 2, to watch Miss Marvel, to watch the future, blah blah blah. So it's really interesting, the Inhuman stuff.
Yeah, dare I say, especially now in the state that Marvel's in, they're in a very weird stage where post Endgame, you've got some fans who are lingering around, kind of dipping their toes in the water, seeing what's happening with the post Endgame stuff. Some fans who have absolutely checked out and just gone, nope, that's my ending. I don't really want to see anything else additional to that. And you've got some fans who are coming in who are brand new. Because of that, they've got a very interesting kind of situation where, I mean, we've already said it, like, we're getting fatigue from it. We're big fans of Marvel. We're starting to feel it with the amount that's coming up. So if you use the word Inhuman, that's great and all if the character becomes an Inhuman for the Marvel fans who are sticking by it. and the Marvel fans who are really kind of fully dedicated to it. They'll read the comics every single week they come out. They'll watch every single TV show, watch every show, and then they will kind of go deep into the lore of it. But for those casual fans that they're trying to keep hold of post Endgame, it's impossible to keep hold of them if you say that like Kamala is an Inhuman. What you might be able to do is you might be able to keep hold of those fans if you say she's a mutant and introduce the X-Men in, because that is a kind of it's a media that it's a media that is not only tried and tested, but it's very well loved. It's still in the minds of people. I mean, they've had the second reboot of it with the James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender incarnations of Professor X and Magneto, which I'd say the first two films were great for, and then the second two films were not so great for. But the fact that it's still in characters' minds, I want to say that there's better kind of energy around the X-Men than there is around the Inhumans. So you may as well go for the X-Men because it will draw in more fans.
I mean, X-Men, when Marvel went bankrupt in the 90s, there's a reason that the properties bought by the other companies weren't Avengers. It was Spider-Man, it was X-Men, it was Fantastic Four. They are not the golden child on paper, but they are the money. And it's really interesting what you both said earlier, actually, about Kamala's origin 2014. Now, this is my speculation, but Marvel wouldn't allow. So, although Fox owned the X-Men, Marvel controlled merchandising, the same for Disney with Spider-Man. Marvel and Spider-Man, sorry, not Sony. And they'd allow Spider-Man merchandise, but they wouldn't allow any X-Men merchandise. That's why, if you actually think about it, there's been no X-Men merch. You see nothing from those films because they were trying to get those rights back. And it kind of makes me think that when Miss Marvel came out in 2014 in the books, did they do it for a tactical reason? They didn't want her to be classed as an X-Men, well, an X-woman, I guess. So that's my sort of tinkering thoughts there coming out loud. But yeah, an interesting predicament moving forward. I kind of want to say that we know San Diego's this weekend. The Marvel panel is going to be 1 a.m. on Sunday morning for us in the UK, 5 p.m. PT for Americans. We know that they don't stream it at San Diego, but everything leaks online anyway. So we're, I think by Sunday morning, I know we're going to be in a very different predicament with Marvel, potentially. We might have a map. We might have an idea of where things are moving towards. And we've got another great comment by Bavari. I'm not fatigued, but more worried that for me at least, it looks like the financial arm of Disney is messing with the creative 6-episode 4-man MMM and thought under 2 hours. Now, this is a very good point, actually. So She-Hulk's going to be 9 episodes, but they've confirmed it's going to be, I think, 30 minutes on average an episode, so shorter run times, but probably the same length as a 6-episode, 48-minute drama. And obviously shorter run times here. So financially, the long films work. Spider-Man made 1.9 bill, Bond made 800 mil, which is, I think, the second highest last year for American. Disney's in an interesting predicament where there are rumors they've messed with Thor. And I'm not going to give my thoughts on Thor in that regard, but I think there's a lot of Thor on the cutting room floor, probably because they improv probably a second film if they wanted to, with how the sets are for a Taika film in a positive way. And Ministry of Madness, that's Sam Raimi's. I don't think Marvel have got involved there. I think the only work Marvel got involved was getting rid of Scott Derrickson before Raimi came on board.
I think there was a scene reportedly of Baron Mordo
decapitating. Wanda killing Mordo at the start.
Yeah. But apart from that, I didn't know there's anything left on the
It's interesting. I mean, because this is a TV review, I don't want to harp on box office because you both know I could do that all day. But obviously, Thor's weekend this week was a 68% drop, which is pretty bad for Marvel standards. And it's now looking at a worldwide box office run of 760 million if it's lucky, which is pretty much the same as Ragnarok, which isn't great for 5 years. Different inflation, growth of the universe, etc. But also, again, that means that Thor and Doctor Strange combined would have made less than Spider-Man last year. Marvel's in a predicament where I feel they need to make a creative choice now where not so many shows and films overlapping, coming out near each other. You need to find room to have patience in between. I feel they've been a bit hasty on the green lights. I know that we're getting literally She-Hulk next month. We're getting What If next month. We're going to get Black Panther in November, which is great. That's a nice 4-month cinema gap. Then we're going to have another 3-month gap to Ant-Man. But then how many of the series are going to take place? So moving forwards for Marvel, I'm going to refrain from going into it until I've seen Comic-Con's panel. Because if they put that timeline up on the screen, we're going to know what they're working towards, which I think is still Kang. Because I still think they are moving somewhere, but they don't have to tell us. the same time, if they come out and announce like 20 extra shows and 20 extra films, I think there's going to be a lot of people groaning. And certainly, like, they're not financial losses, Thor and Doctor Strange. They're still massive successes at a box office. But there is no way that Disney and Marvel analysts are going to be okay with films that should be crossing 1 bill, not getting near it. Films that should be hitting 1.2 bill, not getting near it. So it's a really interesting situation moving forwards for Marvel. And it's kind of tying to my next point. The end credit scene, obviously, for this is setting up the Marvels next year. And I really didn't mind the credit scene. But I'm now really worried that next year when Captain Marvel 2 comes out, we're going to have the whole conversation of everybody needs to go back and watch a series. Which I think doesn't affect us. We're literally on here talking Marvel. We know Marvel. On a hypothetical, let's say I was taking my dad, which I wouldn't. It would be, Dad, go watch this 6-episode series to go and watch an hour-and-a-half film. He would just say no on principle. And that's why he's not seen Doctor Strange, because he's not seen WandaVision. So, I don't know, that's one random example, but do you both see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, it's going to get to the stage where we're going to have to genuinely predict and pick and choose which series are going to have relevance to it. Like, for example, you know for a fact that WandaVision has already had a massive influence on one of the MCU films. You know that Loki's probably going to be the next one, with introductions of characters and everything like that.
Oh, Kang was in that, and we've got Ant-Man in February.
Yeah, I mean, Miss Marvel is going to be a massive impact because, of course, she's going to be a character in the Marvels. Whereas shows like Hawkeye, even the What If, Moon Knight, those are ones where maybe you could kind of look around and go, you can maybe get away with skipping them. It's getting to that stage where you do genuinely have to pick and choose, and that's crazy. If you can't keep up, then it's kind of not rewarding. It's rewarding the diehard fans, but it's not rewarding the casual fans that kind of made up most of that, billions upon billions that you made when you kind of released your films. So you're trading in kind of, it's an unusual one. It is an unusual one.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Yeah, I think they need to see, the way that I see it, Marvel have set up 3 different sort of landscapes. Like, you've got the sort of earthbound sort of stuff, like Hawkeye and stuff like that. Then you get the sort of cosmic stuff like Miss Marvel,
Guardian,
and then you have the multiverse sort of stuff with Loki and stuff like that. So I think if they are planning on bringing all that together, then I don't think it's going to take as well as like the setup for Endgame, because all of that was really well done. It was mapped out. Nobody had that sort of Marvel fatigue. Whereas now, I think they're just greenlighting stuff for the sake of it. I think when Moon Knight was airing, Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers came out and said that they didn't actually have a solid plan, which was really surprising and threw a lot of people off, because if you don't have a solid plan, why are you greenlighting like Moon Knight and Miss Marvel if you don't have a sort of your own end game? You need, like, I think that's what Marvel did really well in the first 10 years. They had this builds up to this builds up to this, and it all builds up to Endgame. Whereas I don't think, maybe they do have that, but if they don't, then it's going to be a problem, because it's just going to be sort of like an incoherent mess that they're going to try and like take bits and stick it all together and hope it works, essentially.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring this once more. The connective universe is a blessing and a curse. I wouldn't mind the series not connected, and if people complain they're not, that's also a very good point, actually. People will complain they're not connected, and I know Moon Knight's going to say, is it Midnight Suns or something? I'm sorry, I don't know which one. But
yeah, with Blade and the werewolf.
And I'm going to throw this in for thought, because nothing's better than me bringing Star Wars to Marvel discussions. What was the biggest criticism of the sequel trilogy? It wasn't organised. It was done a film at a time, no plan. What's the biggest pro for Star Wars at the moment? The Mandalorian universe is a coherent plan they've been working on for years. It's building up to something mega. So maybe we don't know yet, and it's kind of the separation where, okay, Star Wars is out of films temporarily. They are going to be doing films again in the future, but they have very abundantly made clear this is a Mandalorian TV universe. This is not connected to Obi-Wan. This is not connected to the film. This is a Mandalorian world. And we'll get the same with Ahsoka. We know that's part of the Mando world. But we know that Obi-Wan's not. We know that Cassian isn't. And it's about how they not just market the shows, also, I guess it's a blessing that Star Wars can have a timeline, whereas Marvel is the current. I couldn't ever see Marvel saying, let's do a film from 30 years ago. Let's set it in. I mean, okay, they did Captain Marvel. That's a silly comparison because that's set in the 90s, but they couldn't do that for a phase and be the same thing. And it's really interesting. And I honestly think we'll have the answers on Sunday. I think on Sunday, and I'm going to be blunt, if they haven't given the answers on Sunday, not me, I think there'll be a lot of people kicking off, a lot of people moaning, saying, why haven't they announced this at Comic-Con? Why haven't they said what they're doing at Comic-Con? Blah, blah, blah. It's time for Feige to bring up the diagram. And if he doesn't do it at Comic-Con, we've got D23 in September. So we've got 2 big events for Marvel in the next 8 weeks.
We still don't really know what the timeline is, where this phase ends, really.
Yeah.
We kind of know that it's probably going to end with Fantastic Four, but that's not a guarantee. And that's also
to Star Wars.
I was going to say that's 2 years off now. It's a bit
also
of a mess,
Miss Marvel. Did they even reference the blip? I know they had Avengers Con. I know they had Iman dying, but it was nice for them not to say everything changed for 5 years. They just pretended like it was all fine, which is good. Because you lose people by saying there's talk of the Secret Invasion is going to be set during the blip. I'm like, do we need a series set during the blip? Why not after? And it's not confusing for me because I don't know where they're going, but it will be the general audience who don't know where they're going and don't know why they don't know where they're going. So yeah, it's an open book, and I think we will have answers in time. If that's a polite way to round that part of the chat off, which
I think Sunday will reveal all. I think.
Yeah, and maybe there's enough. We'll have a video on Sunday, and that's just me hyperficating, poncising. Sorry, I forgot the right word. It's too hot. But if we're gonna get into Bavari's final point before I do my final point, the 616 sentence is the first mistake Feige made, because now hardcore fans will critique everything that's different than comics. We've got our own Iman Vellani in the chat. I'm joking. Bavari jumps on a lot of our Marvel stuff, and I'm very grateful because he tends to point us in the right direction with comics and stuff. So interesting you said that. And my theory of Feige is he wants to go. There's the report that he wants a competent director to do Fantastic Four, which a producer shouldn't be saying, because he doesn't want to oversee it. He wants to do a Star Wars film, which to me is a sign he wants that anyway. And I think he's plotting his long-term escape, especially with the terrible CEO getting Disney getting a new 5-year contract extension. But that being said, if I'm going to head into my final thoughts on Miss Marvel, I'm just going to call it delightful. Again, I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. I was just completely taken aback by the family dynamic, and I can't wait to see more of them next year. Honestly, it's the best bit of marketing the Marvels is probably going to get into the trailer, because it's just a really fun time with this, and I can't wait to see more from everyone involved.
Yeah, I would say this show is refreshing. It's something slightly different. It introduces a character which I'm sure will be loved very much so down the line, with an enthusiastic actor behind it who would happily play this character for years to come. So you've got loads of content coming in from that. It was just something really, really refreshing. And as much as I'm getting Marvel fatigue, this show kind of it drew it back a little bit, which was nice to see. So it's a nice little kind of refresher before kind of heading forwards with Marvel.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I wasn't getting Marvel fatigue as many as maybe a lot of other people were. I was still quite interested. But the way they did Kamala Khan as a character, it was refreshing, and I did enjoy it a lot, especially because of cultural impact and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think overall it was a really good show. I'd probably put it in the top 3 of my Marvel shows that Disney Plus have released, excluding the Netflix ones because you're not topping those. But the Disney Plus ones, I think it's top 2, top 3. But yeah, I think I did really enjoy it.
No, that's what I said. I think I'm saying I've probably got Hawkeye first, then this, then WandaVision. I think Hawkeye and this has struck their landings.
I would put Loki at number 1 personally from this run.
Interesting. Well, we know season 2's filming right now. It's been all over the news.
McDonald's
that will be back next year. Yeah, free advertising from McDonald's. Not they need it. But that's going to do it for our Miss Marvel review. So please do comment your thoughts. If you're not watching it live, thank you for the comments as always. Now Marvel stuff. And if you are watching in the future, why not put a comment in the description below? Let us know your thoughts on the series. Did you enjoy it? What were your thoughts heading? I'm more intrigued to know what you thought coming into it. And how you felt after the series rather than the other stuff, because I think it's really interesting how the show's marketed and and the sort of how everything sort of changed over the 4 or 5 weeks of it airing. So please comment your thoughts. And if you're a fan of Marvel, it's not going away. We keep saying that. There could be a video on Sunday for San Diego. Who knows? There's going to be a lot more Marvel stuff. There's a What If Season 2 next month. There's a She-Hulk next month. There's a Black Panther in November. There's a lot of stuff happening with Marvel, and that's just the end of 2022. Bloody hell. So, as I said, hit the subscribe button if you're a fan. There's a link in the description for all of our MCU TV reviews and our film reviews. It's got its own playlist. We did Thor a couple of weeks ago. If you're curious about our thoughts on that. And Tayte, where can people find us when we've got videos to announce and all that sort of stuff?
Find us absolutely everywhere. So go on to Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy. Go onto Facebook and Letterboxd. Just type in Cinema Savvy. And go on to Redbubble, pick up some merch, help out the channel in the description as well.
Definitely. So everybody, please do that. And there's a lot of other stuff happening on the channel. I mentioned there's a review for Light and Magic that came out earlier today. The Embargo went up at 5. One of the best behind-the-scenes series you'll ever see on let alone a CGI company on the industry. So if you get the chance, check that out when it streams next Wednesday, Disney Plus. But the review is up now. And if you're a fan of film as well, not just Marvel, we've got the Steven Spielberg retrospective. Carries on tomorrow with The Lost World, Jurassic Park. That is going to be up tomorrow evening. And then we've got Amistad Saving Private Ryan and loads more on the way in the following week. So a lot of Spielberg stuff, a lot of new releases, old releases. It's getting busy. It's been a crazy year so far. We're midway through July and we can't wait to show us what we've got planned for you. So thank you all for watching at home and be sure to join us on the next one. Take care.